What if the President of the United States could simply stand on a stage in New York, laugh, and claim ownership of a piece of the ocean floor 8,000 kilometers away? Not through treaty, not through war, not through any law that exists on paper anywhere in the world, just by saying it. On August 14th, 2026, that's exactly what happened. Donald Trump stood in front of a crowd in Long Island and said 5 words that should have stopped the room cold. Pretty soon, I'll be declaring the Hormuz Strait a territory of the United States. He said it with a chuckle, like it was a punchline, like it was already done. But here's the problem. The Strait of Hormuz isn't American. It never has been. It's a 33-kilometer channel of water squeezed between Iran on one side and Oman on the other, 2 sovereign nations who have shared legal jurisdiction over it for centuries. No American ship built that strait. No American law governs it. And yet right now, the United States Navy is enforcing a blockade through it. No ships move unless Washington allows them to move. So the question isn't just, can he do this? The question is, what happens the moment he tries? Because within hours, Iran answered back. Not with silence, not with denial, with a warning wrapped in defiance. Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister, Garibabadi, fired back a statement that should be studied by every strategist in Washington. The Strait of Hormuz cannot be seized by tweet, nor by aircraft carrier, nor by issuing an order, nor by an election speech. He wasn't finished. Iran neither fears threats nor cowers before displays of power. That's not the language of a country that's losing. And while the world's attention locks onto this war of words over a strip of water carrying 20% of the planet's oil and gas supply, something else is happening. Something quieter, something the Pentagon does not want you looking at. Out on the USS Abraham Lincoln, currently deployed in these same waters, a story is unraveling that has nothing to do with missiles or blockades and everything to do with what's happening to the people inside that steel hull. 8 months into a deployment that was never supposed to last this long. 3 threads, 1 collision course. Can a president actually claim a strait he doesn't control? Why does Iran sound more confident the longer this war drags on? And what is really happening aboard one of America's most powerful warships? The thing the Navy is calling completely misrepresented but refuses to explain? By the end of this, you'll understand all 3. But first, you need to understand how a routine war over gasoline prices turned into a fight over ownership of the ocean itself. To understand why a sitting American president is talking about annexing a stretch of ocean, you have to go back 6 months to the day this war didn't start with troops, but with a single strike order. February 28th, 2026. The United States and Israel launched a coordinated military campaign against Iran. The stated reason was simple, and it's the same reason Trump has repeated in almost every speech since. Iran could not be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. It's the #1 state sponsor of terror in the world, Trump said at that same Long Island rally, defending the campaign months later. Americans, he added, were paying a tiny. Tehran began restricting movement through the strait, and by March, Trump was already issuing deadlines. First 1, then extensions, pushing the date Iran had to open Hormuz further and further back, all while thousands of additional U.S. troops moved into the region. Then came something that looked briefly like an ending, a memorandum of understanding, a fragile pause in hostilities between the U.S. and Iran. For a moment, there was a ceasefire. It didn't last. By July, the agreement had collapsed entirely, both sides accusing the other of violations. And when it fell apart, the blockade came roaring back, this time harder, more absolute than before. "We have the blockade," Trump said in August. "No ships get through unless we want them to." He called it a wall of steel. Unstoppable, in his words. And this is where the story takes its strangest turn, because controlling the blockade wasn't enough. Last month, Trump floated an idea that stunned trade lawyers and economists alike, that the United States should become the self-declared guardian of the Strait of Hormuz, and in exchange, collect a 20% toll on every single product that passes through it. Every barrel of oil, every tanker, every shipment bound for economies that have nothing to do with this war. Legal experts were blunt about it. Under international maritime law, law that protects free passage of commercial vessels through international straits, such a toll would be flatly illegal. You cannot charge rent on international water. But by then, the idea had already done its job. It planted the seed. If America could tax the strait, why not just own it outright? Which brings us right back to that stage in Long Island, and 5 words that turned a toll proposal into a declaration of ownership. One loop is starting to close. You now understand how we got from war to annexation talk, but 2 bigger ones remain wide open, and the next one takes us straight to the man who answered Trump's threat without blinking. Every empire eventually meets someone who refuses to be afraid of it. In this story, that someone has a title most people outside foreign policy circles have never heard. Deputy Foreign Minister for Legal and International Affairs. His name is Garibabadi, and within hours of Trump's declaration, he didn't hide behind a spokesperson or a vague government statement. He posted it himself, directly, in plain language, built to be quoted. Trump said that after Iran's defeat, he will soon declare the Strait of Hormuz as American territory, he wrote. Then came the line that mattered. The Strait of of Hormuz cannot be taken over by a tweet, nor by an aircraft carrier, nor by issuing a decree, nor by an election speech. Read that again. He didn't just deny the claim. He listed every method of power America actually has: military force, executive authority, media influence, and dismissed all of them, one by one, as insufficient. That's not the messaging of a government bracing for collapse. That's the messaging of a government that believes time is on its side. And here's why that confidence isn't just posturing. Geography does not care who has the bigger navy. The Strait of Hormuz sits between two coastlines only: Iran to the north, Oman to the south. That's it. Those are the only two nations on Earth with a legitimate territorial claim to those waters under international law. The United States isn't a third owner waiting to be recognized. It has no coastline there at all. No treaty grants it jurisdiction. No historical claim exists to point to. So when Trump says, pretty soon, the honest answer is, soon according to what legal mechanism? Declared by executive order? Recognized by which international body? Iran's own state authority overseeing the strait made this exact point weeks before Trump's speech, posting bluntly that ownership claims don't change the reality. The strait stays blocked until Iran's conditions are accepted, regardless of who says they own it. That's the leverage Iran is playing with. Not tanks, not missiles, just 20% of the world's oil and gas supply, sitting behind a door only Tehran controls the key to. Think about what that actually means beyond the headlines. Every day this blockade holds, gas prices ripple upward in countries that have nothing to do with this war. Shipping insurance costs climb. Asian manufacturing economies that depend on Gulf oil start recalculating their entire energy strategy. This isn't a regional standoff anymore. It's a pressure valve on the global economy, and Iran has its hand on the release. Which raises the real question underneath all of this. The one Trump's declaration was maybe never really about the strait at all. If you can't legally take it, and you can't militarily hold a body of water you don't have jurisdiction over, even with warships, what are you actually trying to do by saying you will? Is it a threat, or is it a distraction? Something loud enough to pull attention away from a different problem. One that isn't happening in Iranian waters at all. But on the deck of an American warship, the Navy insists is being misrepresented. Because that story was already breaking, and it was breaking quietly at the exact same time Trump was making headlines about owning the ocean. While the world argued about who owns the strait, something else was unfolding 2,000 miles away. On the deck and below the deck of one of the most powerful warships in the American fleet, the USS Abraham Lincoln. 8 months into a deployment supporting U.S. operations against Iran. 8 months of non-stop tension in waters where a blockade could turn into open conflict at any hour of any day. And according to reporting that started surfacing through Military Times, something was breaking down inside that ship long before anyone in Washington wanted to admit it. A sailor went overboard. A U.S. official confirmed it to CNN, not in combat, not from an attack. The incident became one entry in what reporters described as a growing list of concerns aboard the ship. Concerns tied not to enemy fire, but to the mental toll of a deployment that kept getting extended and extended again with no clear end date anyone on that ship could count on. Think about what that actually is. A warship built to project unstoppable power. The same wall of steel Trump bragged about on stage, quietly dealing with a crisis of human endurance inside its own walls. The strength on the outside and the strain on the inside, existing in the same hull at the same time. When the story broke, the Pentagon's response wasn't transparency, it was denial. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, speaking to reporters during a trip to Central America, called the reporting on conditions aboard the Lincoln completely misrepresented. But when pressed on specifics, what exactly was wrong with the reporting, he offered nothing. No correction, no detail, just the dismissal. The reporter who broke the story wasn't willing to let that stand quietly. Natalie Oliverio, the Military Times Pentagon reporter behind the original story, pushed back directly, saying Hegseth's response amounted to gaslighting of our force, and that the troops on that ship deserve transparency and accountability. That's a serious accusation to level at the Secretary of Defense. And it's happening at the exact moment the administration needs the public's full attention pointed somewhere else, toward a bold, headline-grabbing claim about owning a strait of water, rather than toward uncomfortable questions about what an 8-month deployment is doing to the people enforcing the blockade that claim depends on. There's now a growing list of concerns aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, and there are growing reports that the ship, the literal physical instrument enforcing this blockade Trump keeps calling unstoppable, may not be able to sustain this deployment indefinitely, which means the wall of steel might not be as unstoppable as the speech made it sound. So here's where all three threads finally start pulling toward the same point. A president who says he'll claim water he has no legal right to. A foreign minister who says that claim means nothing without power to back it. And a warship enforcing that power from the inside. A warship that might be quietly running out of the one resource no blockade can replace. The people holding it together. What happens when the thing enforcing an impossible claim starts to crack? That's what the final part answers. Let's answer every question this video opened with. All three, starting with the one that started everything. Can Donald Trump actually declare declare the Strait of Hormuz a U.S. territory? No, not under any law that currently exists. Not through executive order, not through military occupation, not through a speech on a stage in Long Island. International maritime law is explicit. The strait belongs to the two nations whose coastlines touch it, Iran and Oman. The United States can blockade it. The United States can patrol it. The United States can even illegally try to toll it. But ownership requires a legal claim that simply does not exist, and no aircraft carrier changes that fact. Garibaldi wasn't exaggerating when he said it couldn't be seized by tweet. He was stating something closer to settled international law than most people realized. So if the declaration was never legally real, what was it actually for? That's the second loop closing. Because a claim like this doesn't need to be legally enforceable to be politically powerful. It needs to be loud. It needs to dominate headlines. It needs to make a struggling 6-month war sound like it's on the verge of a historic American victory. Ownership of the very waterway that's been humiliating U.S. naval strategy since February. Even if it can never actually happen, saying it out loud reframes the entire narrative. From "we can't get through the blockade" to "we're about to own the blockade." That's not foreign policy, that's message control. And message control matters most exactly when there's something you'd rather people weren't looking at. Which brings us to the final loop, the one hiding in plain sight the entire time. The USS Abraham Lincoln isn't just a ship enforcing a blockade. It's the physical proof of the cost of this war. A cost measured not in territory, but in the 8 months of strain etched into every sailor still standing watch on that deck. A sailor went overboard. The Pentagon called honest reporting misrepresented without explaining why. And the reporter who broke the story didn't back down because she understood something the administration didn't want acknowledged. You cannot sustain a wall of steel if the people inside it are breaking. Here's the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath all three of these threads. Trump's declaration about Hormuz isn't a sign of strength. It's a signal of how badly this war needs a win it hasn't earned yet. A president can say he'll own an ocean. He cannot say it into being true. And while the world watches the theater of a territorial claim that legal experts already call impossible, real sailors on a real ship are absorbing the actual weight of a war that was supposed to be over months ago. Iran's message was blunt, but it might be the most accurate sentence spoken by anyone in this entire conflict. This strait will only be closed and opened under Iran's command. Not America's decree, not a rally applause line, not a wall of steel running out of steam from the inside. The question this war was always really asking wasn't who can claim the ocean. It was who can actually hold it, and at what cost to the people being asked to do the holding.